Haidong! In this video, we're going to talk about aspects of Yedo 5. All of the things we're going to be talking about in this video are new moves. So Yedo 5 has quite a few new moves, some new-ish concepts, but there are so many new things to kind of talk about, which is kind of interesting because it kind of goes into fits and starts of how much new stuff you really get to absorb. 5 is one that has a lot of new moves, right? So the first one we're going to talk about is, I'm sure there's a Korean word for it, but again, the way it's been translated for me is the unicorn stab. This is in the very beginning, right? So we're here, we block, and we're going to go down into our unicorn stab, right? So the stance itself, we've done the eagle stance, right? So this is from Sangsu 8, right? Again, we have kind of this 90-degree thing, idea of kind of leaning in here, but now we're just going to be pushing more forward here. So again, you have the knee down, our knees up here, and we're going to be stabbing up here. So this is again what the unicorn stab is called. I'm assuming because it's coming more upright like the horn on the unicorn, but you're here. The idea, allegedly, is you're coming up underneath someone's guard and you're stabbing them under the jaw, and you're gracefully going to come back out and clear. A quick word of caution, right? So going into this stance, if you're not used to it, which I'm frankly not particularly used to, can be pretty hard on your knees, right? So both of your knees are pretty bent, right? Which is not good for someone who has half the cartilage in one knee. But really bending into it, really getting, again, your whole body behind that one stab. If you can do it well, and again, I've seen a few people be able to do this, it is a pretty strong stab. So just a word of caution, just make sure you're, again, stretched out, all kind of fun stuff, before you really start to go full on practicing this technique. Just be careful with that. But that said, let's talk a little bit about that particular stab, right? So think about the context of it, right? So in the beginning, we're coming here, we're blocking. So again, allegedly I have this sword here. I'm allegedly coming in with that thrust, right? Now I just wanted to, again, play with the idea of, again, application, right? Now, do you need to get that low in order to get that thrust? Maybe not necessarily, right? Although if you can do it, and you can do it powerfully, more power to you. But if we're here, and we really get low, think about what's going on, that's in terms of where my sword is relative to theirs. As I kind of dig in and get lower and lower, I'm moving closer and closer to them. My sword is actually going to get lower and lower on their sword, which means they're actually going to get more and more power over mine. So as I do that, as we kind of got grinding a little bit closer, they're going to get a little more power, although because I'm also getting closer, it's going to be more power versus power, and eventually getting underneath the jaw. So that said, this is a pretty long shot stab, right? Because it doesn't take that much for me to get deflected off just like an inch per se, and that's going to be enough to really get my sword way offline, especially for such a narrow target area such as under the jaw. So in general, at least in terms of practicing, and again thinking about application, the unicorn stab, again, really getting really low on it. If you can do it really quickly, really accurately, again, more power to you. But again, think about application. It's not going to be as useful as potentially just coming in here, just boring in and going with a sort of sideways thrust, similar to Sangsu 5, right? But anyway, just again, if you can think of a better application, by all means, let me know in the comments. That said, if you are able to get that low, they might be able to get, again, below their ability to manipulate your sword, right? So if they're up here and you suddenly drop down in order to come for that thrust, I would need to do kind of a lot to kind of get you out of the way, right? So again, if you are able to kind of drop down from Chianse to that eagle stance, again, that's probably going to be even more power to you. But again, just thinking about all the things you can do in this particular circumstance. The next move we're going to talk about is what I call the corkscrew. Now this move, at least to me, is a relatively new one. So the way I learned it is very different from the way it is currently practiced. I believe I learned this within 4 years, right? So within 4 years ago, at least of the time this was stamped. So it's fairly recent, right? And whenever I've seen it, it has been like this more recently as well. Yeah, so the corkscrew. So just to kind of see what it looks like, the idea is I'm making contact, draw through. Making contact, draw through. So notice my blade is coming down in a very wide slicing motion. But the idea is you're kind of like, almost like a Christmas tree, right? So cutting down this way, also like a corkscrew. So cool, so what I really like about this technique is it does actually work on core strength as well. So as opposed to like here and just kind of like, you have to be like really tight core here, and everything is kind of like a single motion, push through, right? This is really good practice for, again, your control, which is one reason why I think we like to have this form in tournaments, is because that really shows the difference between someone who has that bodily control over, again, the core and, again, the deep shoulder, versus someone who's going to be like, right? It's very different, and also, again, it's not necessarily fast. You don't have to necessarily do it fast. In fact, the slower you do it, the more impressive, although from an application perspective, you probably want to do it a little more quickly. But yeah, so this is a nice one, right? The idea of this is simply, for the same reason we do that was a really weird sentence, Sangsu 9, right? Where we have this nice big clearing motion before we come back here. Same thing. So now this time we're just kind of making sure we have a good 360 as we're also kind of dropping down. Right, so we're here, kind of check as you drag down. This is going to be a little bit more effective, at least in terms of speed and repeatability, than doing a Sangsu 9 clear. Because actually we do this twice, right? So we're here, clear, right? It's actually really easy to keep repeating it, as opposed to just doing this over and over. So it's really good for repetition. It's good in terms of speed, right? So it's a little bit faster because you're able to drag it down as well than merely doing a 360 clear with a crosscut. So this is a nice, fun technique for us to do. We're going to do a variant of it in Yedo 9. But again, it's new, it's fun, it's going to be working on major concepts I would like for us to think about. And the last one that I would like to talk about is actually the very end. So it's actually the put away for this form. And it's actually going to be using the false edge of the back of the sword in a one-handed strike. So back in the day, when we did do this, we kind of just did a figure eight. We're just like, okay, we're done, right? But a little more nuance, right? So as we've kind of like, again, got a little more information from Korea and we had a little more interaction with that, it's a little bit more nuanced, right? So the idea is we're here, we cut. This is actually in a short stance, but I'm trying to stay in frame. So we're here, again, assuming that I'm in a short stance. We're actually going to strike across. We're going to use the back of the sword either to cover, strike someone if we need to, but strike and then roll, right? So this is weird. So we have done the false edge block pretty early on. So like Sangsu 7 is really the first time we really use it. We can potentially think about using it as early as Form 2, Sangsu 2, which is kind of fun. But this is the first time we're doing it from our weak side, one-handed, right? So we have to engage the whole body a little bit more, especially in a short stance. So we're here. So as opposed to like Kimase, we can kind of get a little more hip action there. Here, you're gonna still use your hip, but it's gonna be a little more arm up here, and then roll. So what I like about this one is that, again, it works on a muscle group that you're usually not used to using, and in fact, it's not going to be as deep as I usually use, right? So usually when we interact with cuts and blocks and stuff like that, we want to have, again, engage the whole, again, deep shoulder, whole arm as we cut this way. This is going to be different. Now, you can still use some of the deeper shoulder, but it's going to be a lot more difficult. So what I like about this is, again, it's using, it just comes from a different position, right? So when I'm here, you usually don't think I'm going to come up with that block, unless it's two-handed, right? I'm one-handed, usually think I'm going to turn for an uppercut or something. It's a little bit faster. Strike up, and then put away, right? Now in this connotation. Allegedly, this is part of the actual put away, right? So it's not merely, or it's not intended to be blocking something out of the way and then put away. The idea is to get that blow away with a nice quick jerk here, and then put away again to let you wipe it down. Yeah, so again, this is a new idea, right? In fact, all three of these are new techniques that we can play with. So can we retcon? It's probably not going to work as well, just because these are all brand new techniques. Again, the ideas behind them aren't necessarily new, right? So we want to, again, kind of go back up, right? So we do use the false edge quite often. We do come from our weak side sometimes, right? But usually, again, we're two-handed. So as you go through your forms, again, think about, again, the muscle groups activating, right? So if we do an upper block this way, two hands, notice how different it is when we're trying to engage it with one hand, trying to get the same power. And we do, again, so retconning another concept, we do clears pretty often, right? We start doing 360 clears a little bit later. But again, compare the sensations for all of those, right? So compare a clear simple crosscut, center cut, 360, and then the corkscrew. Kind of notice what are the benefits for each of them, right? And if you're like me, you're gonna find that you like the corkscrew. Again, the more you practice it, it's gonna feel really, really weird the first couple times you do it because it is such a different motion. But it's kind of nice. So like after you get kind of used to, again, the core tightening and kind of dragging sort of down as you do it, the synchrony of it is actually really graceful and actually kind of nice. So practice all of those clears and kind of feel what the difference is among all of them. And the last one was our stab. For that one, just kind of think about, again, what's going on, right? So in the form, we're deflecting, right? So think about the change in elevation. Now this is also true for, obviously, thanks to 8, right? Where we do a lot of change in elevation, kind of mess with our partner a little bit. But yeah, so again, just think about all those concepts as you go, again, retcon, play with this form, as well as training with your current forms, right? So try to think about what the stabs are necessarily doing per se. Think about if you're doing any clears, again, the activation of the core, and all that fun stuff. So as usual, so keep training, stay humble, and stay safe. Haidong!